Hey there! In today's video, we are going to be talking about the top 5 trends that we are seeing in grant writing and funding broadly now in 2022, and the one action step you can take to stay ahead of the trend. All right, with that, let's hit it. Trend number 1, and this is a very, very good trend. I'm loving this, and I want you to be on the front end of it. And that is a shift from deficit-based writing to strength-based writing. And I find that a little bit technical to say, and so the easier way of saying it, my friend Tara came up with, was what is strong versus what is wrong. So when you think about writing your grant narrative, and I'm pulling this from a chapter in my book. Which chapter is this? I don't remember exactly. I think it's, let's see. Anyway, it's basically a section in the book where we talk about how to write your grant narrative. There is a lot of coaching that I received when I was early in my career about how catastrophic it is, how terrible and in dire straits this community is in need, and just the language is so negative and so wrong on so many levels because it doesn't acknowledge, it's saying like, hi, we can fix you because you have deficits, versus looking at like, what are your strengths? What are the solutions coming from your community that you're driving to solving this problem, right? So I just really recommend that you spend a little bit of time learning about this. We have a blog post on it, and then of course there's my book chapter. You can read about it there as well. So I'm happy to see this trend shift where funders don't expect you to be writing just about deficits. You still certainly need to be writing about what is the problem you're solving, problems, I should say, right? But that is a more macro problem that you're tackling, a challenge, right? And we can write about that with grace while still really observing the strength of the applicant or the beneficiaries that you're representing. So trend number 1, a shift from what is strong versus what is wrong. Okay, trend number 2 that I'm also loving is decolonizing funding. Now, is this as popular as I'd like it to be? No. But I have to tell you, this book really changed my life, and I haven't even finished reading it. So we are teaching a specialized cohort right now for the Northern Connections Partnership, which is Indigenous organizations in Canada and Alaska, and they're collaborating and working together and trying to figure out how do we have more Indigenous-led solutions for issues surrounding climate change, environment, etc., language preservation, that sort of thing. So this book was recommended, Decolonizing Wealth, Indigenous Wisdom to Heal Divides and Restore Balance. Edgar, the author, makes some really interesting points. Essentially, his argument is that what ails philanthropy at its core is colonialism. And he then goes to say, because this is looking at it from an Indigenous perspective, that what can be healing is funding. It can be money. Anything can, we've attached a lot of connotation and weight and often negativity to money, but it also can be a vehicle for change, right? So I really recommend checking out this book. I love when it starts talking about sort of the separation worldview and when that started, because I've always tried to understand, how did we get into this situation in the first place where there is white supremacy? And this really explained it to me in a way that made a lot of sense when we began to have this separation worldview of us versus them. And I have the power as a funder, and you are here asking for it as a lesser, right? So that's a problem. And that's what we're seeing often in philanthropy and in funding, and certainly in grant funding that's coming down in a very structured colonial way, right? This book is challenging that. So I haven't gotten as far yet to like the healing portion, how to heal, but very excited to get there. Thank you to the students that recommended that book. And I do believe that while it is not as far along as it should be getting in terms of this way and worldview of thinking, it is happening. We're seeing this trend really gain some momentum, thankfully. And that's something we can look forward to in 2022 and beyond. So definitely recommend reading it. Okay, point number 3 is that we are seeing a stronger trend towards having a more well put together and thought out logic model behind what you want to get funded. We have an advanced grant writer in our program who we just brought on as an advanced grant writing coach because she has a ton of international grant writing experience for nonprofits. And what was interesting is that she said that the expectation and the demands on the nonprofits internationally, she felt were much, much higher than what was expected of us in the US and in Canada. Now, it's not that reporting is a good thing necessarily, right? Like that's just a lot of cumbersome weight that doesn't necessarily allow you to do the work that you do best. But there is something to wanting to really know, do the activities that we do actually have the impact and serve the person we're designed or the problem we exist to solve, right? And we should be stronger collectively in how we think about and plan and execute and use resources. We have big problems that need solutions, right? And so if we're just doing what we think seems like a good idea, it seems like it's just we're rolling it out, we're just doing it, but we're really not measuring and understanding the impact, what a huge lost opportunity. And so I do believe we're going to see an emphasis more and more by our funders, certainly here in the US and in Canada, really demanding and wanting to know what is your logic model for change and evaluating the impact of your funding programs. So have a chapter on that in the book as well. It was actually put together by Kate Homan-Billmeyer. She's a specialist in doing evaluation type work. So chapter 15 is about how do I plan for project impact and evaluate it. So really recommend that as well. And I think we also have a blog post about it on our website. And if we don't, be sure to get it out there. We have a more robust training about this within the Grant Writing Unicorn Collective as a bonus training, because this is really, really, really important and something that you don't want to have as an afterthought when it comes reporting time. It's something you want to be doing at the very beginning, even before you apply for grant funding. Trend number 4, this COVID-19 gold rush of funding is waning in ways. Obviously, here in the US, we've got the infrastructure bill really ramping up to roll out, so that's going to be a lot of dollars. But in terms of the emergency funding, like right now, whoever applies first, it goes out on a rolling basis, like the applications that we were doing through 2020, like April for that year, right? April 2020 onward. That I'm not seeing as much, right? Like those programs have really quieted or have been spent and they're not being used. So I really recommend that you now start doing a little bit of a shift yourself. And I know we're not out of the water here at all, but as much as you can turn your attention back to your donors and how to strengthen that funding base and how to now, okay, let's look at grant funding that's not emergency based, but more strategic and long-term. You also do want to make sure that you are taking advantage of any of those lingering once-off programs. Here in Alaska, where you can see we have a bit of a snowstorm today, good day for filming. I was working on a project locally. There was some Economic Development Administration funding that they wanted to apply for, encourage them to go for it big time because it was a large pool of grant funding and it's a one-time thing. I don't expect to see the program that we see and saw to be available year after year after year because it didn't exist beforehand. So it was one of those things where it was time sensitive. I know you don't feel ready. I know it feels rushed, but go for it because this is a tremendous opportunity. I want you to be making sure that you have found all of those once-off programs that you possibly could apply for. And if you're now thinking, yes, but how do I find them? Well, the method there is the funding strategy, right? It's kind of our secret sauce. So you can go watch other videos, just search funding strategy and you'll be able to watch it. But basically, there's definitely not something I want you to be missing out on, but do observe that that trend will be declining over the year. Trend number 5, the Great Resignation. What is it? So it's essentially where we're seeing 40 million people resigned in July of 2021. There's a huge amount of people are leaving the workforce. It's typically mid-level careers in healthcare, in tech, and I have to wonder if it's not including education as well, because we get a lot of teachers that are burned out and looking for another way to make money and help people. So that's that. Here's the thing though. Many people want it. They've tasted what it's like to work from home or to be able to work from a van or whatever, and you just don't want to go back. Don't blame you. Others, it's not as much of a choice. It was a matter of just, oh my gosh, so burned out, can't keep having my kids coming home. Like, there's no stability here. There's no childcare. They keep closing, right? Like, just disaster, particularly for mothers. So that led not always out of wanting to leave and become a contractor and start potentially freelancing, right? But realizing like, I have to, because I can't keep existing this way. So I think the Great Resignation is certainly accelerating. In many ways, it's awesome. I mean, it's people like, yes, welcome to the fun side of a DIY career where you have a great time putting things together that actually you have passion behind. Like, that's what I'm doing and it's awesome. But just recognizing that it is a little bit of a double-edged sword. The other thing that I'm really concerned about with the Great Resignation is that often what then people end up doing that have resigned is side hustling, but they don't know how to quite charge enough, and they're not charging enough for their services because they've never really thought about what that business model looks like, right? Like maybe you were employed, so the idea of charging, $18,000 to write a federal grant just blows your mind. But that is often the competitive rates, right? And what concerns me is that 58% of gig workers are making less than full-time employees. And you don't have benefits. So that's a really big triple whammy, right? It's so important to me that if people are resigning, awesome, come be a freelance grant writer. It's super fun, love it, we'll show you how to do it. But please do it in the right way so you can actually build a career out of it, make enough money, and enjoy your life. Have time to take for vacation, be able to afford benefits, that sort of thing, right? So another person that you could go watch that has an interesting perspective on this is Holly Rustick. So she's also an online grant writing course educator, and her opinion on it is that essentially, instead of it being the Great Resignation, in many ways, it's the Great Redistribution, where not everybody's falling out of the workforce. We're just shifting how we're employed and where we're employing ourselves. All right, so let's recap that, and I am going to look at my notes. So top 5 trends that we're seeing in 2022. Number 1, decline of deficit writing and an increase in strength-based writing in your grant narratives. Good work, keep that up. We like that trend. Trend number 2, decolonizing funding. Awesome trend we want to see more of in 2022. So please be sure to get a copy of this book. Recommend any others that you think we should be reading, because I think this is a really, really important topic that we could accelerate some positive change on in 2022. Okay, number 3, an emphasis on having a stronger logic model, really evaluating and understanding the impact of your program. This is also really good. So if you're trying to understand that world, honestly, I think this is an area that we should put together a really good training on, because it's very, higher education based knowledge is out there. Not that that's bad, it's just so chunky and not really that awesome to consume. So if you want the easy version, definitely just read chapter 15 in my book. Okay, and then trend number 4, the COVID gold rush waning. So just be kind of shifting in how you think about your funding from emergency funding to getting back onto that sort of more stable way of thinking about funding your organization. And final point is how you're thinking about the Great Resignation. If you have employees, this is a sure a good time to make sure you're taking care of them, that you're being flexible, that they have a way to show up to work in a way that feels safe, but also allows them to be taking care of their family or whatever else they're dealing with, or their own mental health, for heaven's sakes, right? So if you're an employer at a nonprofit or whatever, please be thinking about how to prevent people from needing to resign from your organization so they can stay there doing the good work. If you're thinking about leaving the workforce, doing your own thing, come talk to us, because that's our expertise. And awesome, also a fantastic plan. You could go for it. You can design your own career, build a life you love. I'm all about that. But do recognize that I want you to be really intentional about it so that you don't just make a lot less money and burn yourself out. We don't want that. Okay, so what's the actionable tip from today's video? I want you to go set up a conversation with the funders that you work with often. Interview them. Do an informational interview. You know how much I love those. and draw out, what do you see are the trends in giving in 2022? How is your organization changing on this or that? How are you seeing deficit-based writing to strength-based writing change in the narratives that are coming through, and how are your program officers receiving that, right? So you're not asking for funding, you're not pitching your project, just go understand how your favorite funders are changing and evolving, and certainly be focusing on the funders that align to your own values. Okay, that's it. Definitely check out the description below for links to all of the things I have referenced here. If you've enjoyed this video, be sure to go check out our website. We've got a free grant writing course. What else? I don't know, a bunch of resources, but I really would recommend probably that, and then just starting with the book. All right, that's it. Catch you later. Bye.